Good evening from Arromanches in Normandy, where 75 years ago today, the first British troops landed on the beaches here at the start of D-Day. By the time night-time fell at the end of that longest day, about 156,000 young men had made it ashore, but more than 4,000 Allied soldiers had died. Their courage and their sacrifice have been remembered here in a series of ceremonies attended by presidents and prime ministers and the last few hundred surviving veterans. Theresa May, in one of her final acts as Conservative leader, paid tribute to what she called the greatest generation. They did their duty, she said. And France's President Macron said, we owe them our freedom. In the first of our reports, here's our Europe editor, James Mates, on how the D-Day heroes were honoured.
Dawn breaking on the day that will always be known as the longest day. And atop the remains of one of the Mulberry harbours that still stand on Gold Beach, a lone piper marks the very moment the first British troops step back onto the beaches of occupied Europe. On the sand, a parade of restored World War II military vehicles, the machines that would carry the Allied armies deep into Normandy, and the enthusiasts who lovingly preserve them and keep the images of this greatest of all amphibious landings alive in the minds of succeeding generations. But central to everything were the veterans, the men and women for whom D-Day is not an anniversary nor a page from the history books, but frequently the defining moment of their lives. There is now a new memorial to them and to the 22,500 in British uniform who did not survive the battle for Normandy. Theresa May and France's President Macron inaugurated it together today.
It is an honour for all of us to share this moment with you. If one day can be said to have determined the fate of generations to come, in France, in Britain, in Europe, and the world, that day was the 6th of June, 1944.
At Bayeux Cathedral, a service of remembrance for fallen comrades.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn.
And as the final strains of the last post faded into the vaulted ceiling above, the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall stood with the Prime Minister in 2 minutes silence. If you fought on D-Day, you will now be in your early 90s at least, and many have had to accept, reluctantly, they can no longer march into the events in their honour. The peace these veterans fought for has lasted 3/4 of a century, the longest in European history. But suddenly, for the first time, their legacy of international rules, cooperation, institutions doesn't seem as permanent as many had assumed.
President Emmanuel Macron and Donald J. Trump.
This, of course, was not a day for politics, but with President Trump as his guest at the American cemetery above Omaha Beach, Emmanuel Macron paid first an eloquent tribute to the American veterans.
We know what we owe to you veterans, our freedom.
But then, talking about what he called the promise of Normandy, spoke directly to Donald Trump.
L'Amérique.
The United States of America, dear Donald Trump, dear President, which is never greater than when it is fighting for the freedom of others.
L'Amérique.
But amid the flypasts and the pomp and the speeches, the veterans of Normandy know who these anniversaries are really about. As they lay their wreaths in Bayeux Cemetery this morning, everyone will tell you it's about those who didn't make it off the beaches. As one of them, Harry Reid, said today, "Don't thank me, don't say I'm a hero. All the heroes are dead, and I'll never forget them as long as I live." James Mates, ITV News, Normandy.
But for veterans like 100-year-old Pixie Jenkins, it didn't feel like a great crusade at the time.
We didn't think we were part of history. We were just doing our job.
Would you have been surprised at all this?
Yes, absolutely astounded. I was only a wren, you know.
As a member of the Women's Royal Naval Service, she helped to load the boats that would carry the men to Normandy.
They are the ones now who are the old men that save this world. They're wonderful. I hope the youngsters today realise just how lucky they are to have had old people like that.
Different places found different ways to show that appreciation. In Edinburgh, the French government gave veterans medals of honour. In Newcastle, cathedral bells tolled for an hour this morning, while in North Wales, the outlines of soldiers were etched in the sand on Rhyl Beach. But if D-Day is to be commemorated for decades to come, it was a wreath from a future king that perhaps best symbolised the commitment of a new generation to remember, one shared by these pupils.
It's such an important day and there's so many lives that are lost that need to be remembered.
So we almost hold a responsibility because this is our country and without them we wouldn't be where we are now, and we need to carry that forward so no one forgets about it.
It is a duty that pales in comparison to that of D-Day, but an important one to uphold.